Hello and welcome to the Everyday Adventure Podcast. My name is Nikki Bass and I will be bringing you thoughts, ideas and stories from some incredible guests to hopefully inspire you to live more adventurously in your everyday lives. So this week, I am absolutely delighted to welcome Kate Mackay to the show. Kate is a performance coach, an NHS management consultant, and the author of Take It All on Board. And this is a self-development book where she uses her journey learning to snowboard in her 30s as a vehicle to help others step outside of their comfort zone. And I connected with Kate over Instagram and immediately loved her posts around not only her snowboarding adventures and her time in the mountains, but the everyday adventures that she was going on, whether it was cycling, adventures near the sea where she lives. And so I felt she really fitted the spirit of this podcast and the theme of this podcast around everyday adventures. So I thought she'd be the perfect guest to catch up with and to chat to her about her own journey in terms of bigger and everyday adventures. So Kate, welcome to the show. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here and I was delighted that you asked me.
Oh, brilliant. So I guess I think starting with the sort of snowboarding theme, because I guess, like I said, that's sort of really where we connected in the first place. I mean, one of the things I think that really interests me about your story and your journey is that often I think with the narrative and the perception around snowboarding is it's a young person's game effectively. And I certainly know from, friends of mine who skied for years and then were like, you know what, I don't really think I want to transfer. I don't think I can handle the falls, or you know what, it's not really for me, it's all baggy trousers and all the rest of it. And I guess I came to it when I was very much in that place of, early 20s and there weren't that many snowboards around and it seemed sort of, I don't know, probably it seemed to me a bit cool at the time, to be honest, even though I was probably less cool doing it than I think I like to imagine. But I'll stop rambling. But I think that thing of coming to something, whether it's snowboarding, whether it's another type of adventure slightly later in life, I won't pretend that 30 is that old, but at that stage, what was it that inspired you to sort of take it up, to start off on that journey of learning something totally new?
Well, you probably won't be surprised to know it was my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband. He snowboarded, and when we started going out, he really wanted me to be able to join him on the slopes and go on holiday with him. Now, I'd skied on a school ski trip as a child when I was like 12, 13, and I absolutely hated it. I could not get my legs to act in a coordinated fashion with the poles, and I had such a bad experience. And bearing in mind, this is back in the day when skis were massive. They weren't like they are now.
I remember, yeah.
And I vowed there and then I'd never go back on the slopes. And over the years, even like in my 20s, people would try and encourage me. Oh, why don't you come away? And I dug my toes in and said, no, I'm not going. And because it was snowboarding and I knew very little about snowboarding, but it was one plank of wood and not two, there were no poles. So I thought, this has got to be easier than skiing. And although it was different to skiing, there was stuff I could get down on a first day on a snowboard that I couldn't manage after a week on skis. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't love at first sight, but I had real glimpses. And yeah, you do fall over a lot. But because I was surrounded by other people that were most of them were snowboarding, that was sort of quite encouraging, I suppose. I wasn't really aware that it was at the time that it was much more of a young person's thing. I didn't really have any preconceived ideas. And I think when you don't have preconceived ideas, or you're not necessarily exposed to what it's all about, you go in with a much more of an open mind. And yes, that first day was an absolute killer. I must have fallen over 50, 60 times. And it wasn't, probably a bit like you, Nikki, it was back in the day when there weren't dedicated snowboard schools. And a lot of it was trial and error. You picked yourself up, you tried again, you watched what other people were doing. And it wasn't really until I was I'd sort of messed about with it for a little bit. And then it was really after I had my daughter that I thought, if I really want to learn this properly, I'm going to have to spend some time and seek out some dedicated, proper snowboarding instruction. And that's what I did. So I was aware by then I was getting towards my mid to late 30s. But actually, there were plenty of other role models around then. And I didn't really think about my age particularly. I was really keen to learn and progress, but I needed to think about how I learnt, because everybody learns differently. And I'm quite cerebral in the way that I learn. So I sought out an instructor that would suit my style of learning. So I think it's that I didn't let other people dictate what I should or shouldn't do. And certainly when I first went on my first snowboard course, which was, my daughter wasn't even 2, there was me and 10 men. I was the only woman. It was out in Chamonix. And I know, although nothing was overtly said to my face, I think people at home were probably a bit surprised that I went away with having, a young baby at home, or she was starting to come towards a toddler now. But, it was quite seen as quite unusual. And even one of the men had queried while I was away, in a nice way, it wasn't nasty, just, why had I not come with a friend? Why was I sort of there? And it was almost that little bit, well, if I waited for a friend or somebody to come along, I could have waited forever. So it was about having a bit of that single-minded focus about what I wanted and not letting other people distract me.
That's so interesting. I mean, there's so many points I could pick up on that. I find it really interesting, the point you made about not having preconceived ideas, or actually the lack of exposure in a way to whether it's media, whether it's stories, whether it's, an idea of what a sport should look like or how it should be framed. Actually, that sort of removed the barriers in a way of when you're learning, because you're not having to live up to a standard or feel like you don't fit in a way. I think that's so interesting, because I think especially nowadays when we're so bombarded with images and stories the whole time, and there are some great stories out there about people sort of breaking the mold, but the majority are still very much fitting a predetermined category. You only have to look at the Olympics, and that it's all young kids out there doing amazing things, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of space for that diversity.
No, I would agree with that. I do think and I suppose certainly mainstream media are only going to spend a small amount of time on something that's considered more of a niche sport like snowboarding, and that the general public are often only exposed to those niche sports when it's things like the Olympics. So they see only a tiny fragment of what that sport is really about. So, I never had any intentions, even in my early 30s. Yes, I do go in the snow park, but I don't do anything at all, and never intended to. But for me, it's more about the enjoyment of the environment, the mountain, being in the most amazing scenery that you would never have access to if you didn't ski or snowboard, spending time with your mates. Snowboarding to me is like really connecting with being a bit of a child again. And, it's snowy outside, let's go and have some fun and play. And, and I think there is that element for me of snowboarding is very different to other sorts of sports. You can have that sort of creativity. And although we talk about diversity, the people that I meet snowboarding are very inclusive. It's almost like, doesn't really matter who you are, what you do, how much money you earn, any of that. It's all about like having fun on the slopes. So, and I really like that sort of connection that you have with people, because it can be quite an intense environment as well, being out, in the mountains. So yeah, for me, the Olympics is just one tiny little bit that you see. It's much, much bigger than that for me.
Yeah. And I think that point about play that you make, I think is so important as well, because I think that's in a way the bit that we tend to lose as we grow and get older, and almost feel like we don't have permission sometimes to sort of reconnect with that part of ourselves.
Yeah, I think we get layer upon layer of inhibitions that start when, you're very young, and that just sort of grow if you let it. And even if it happens very insidiously, you don't even really think about it. And it's probably only really by snowboarding that I really reconnected a little bit with that. So, I think it's by, being able to play, you also learn as well. So I can think of when I was snowboarding and I was trying to do, I was learning to do a bit of fakie. So that's going the opposite way to what you would normally go, just for listeners, if they don't know what that is. And I was just on a baby slope with an instructor. And she sort of said, because I have a habit of looking down rather than looking up, she said, I'm going to hold my mittens up, one of which that had a picture of a panda on and one that had a picture of a kitten. And I had to look up because she was holding her gloves up alternatively. I mean, God, we must have looked ridiculous, but it was so much fun. It sounds a bit ridiculous saying it now, but it completely worked. I was down at the bottom of the slope before I'd even realised and hadn't even looked once. So that by connecting through play, you actually learn as well.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And also that we tend to think as we grow that we need more sophisticated methods of learning. I love that thing about actually the same thing that works, for a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old probably works for us now if we just allow ourselves to connect. Yeah, I guess to go for it really and to try it.
It wouldn't suit everybody. And I have been in groups of women where they've one or two have really balked at doing that because they don't want to appear silly. So, and I suppose with age becomes that little bit more of, I don't really care what other people think.
Well, like you said, it can sort of go one of two ways, can't it? It's either actually you become so inhibited that it feels impossible to access that part of you. But also, like you said, as you get older, sometimes you just stop caring what other people think because you're never going to fit the ideal model of what it should look like anyway. I'm speaking for myself here, clearly not for you.
No. The same applies to me as well.
So I guess I'm just wondering, the snowboarding obviously is one aspect of how you fit adventure into your life and how that's, I guess, continued as you've grown and got older. But I know you take on so many other types of adventures. And I think sort of what I love, as I said in the introduction, is the way in which those are sort of interwoven with your day-to-day life, that they are sort of sometimes, and this is from a perception point of view as much as I guess reality, but there seems to be quite a lot of spontaneity in some of the things that you do and that you come up with. And I was just wondering, what has inspired, because it can be really hard. And I know, speaking to so many friends and listeners, that it can be really hard to find the time and the energy to fit those into your daily routine with the other demands. I mean, what motivates you to keep going? I guess, how do you prioritize?
I think you're absolutely right. It's the same for me, same for other people that I know. And I think your ability and the needs of family and other work pressures change over time. So when my daughter was little, it was really hard. We'd relocated and I'd started a business, and those things combined meant it was really hard, because I used to horse ride as well, to commit to doing the same activity at the same time each week. That was really difficult. Snowboarding, although I didn't do it as often, but it was easier to commit then to go away for a week and do the activity that I really loved. And then as she's got older, I mean, she's now just 16, she now can be left. And that ability to be able to be a bit more spontaneous without having to plan babysitters, childcare, making sure that all of that's okay, has given me a bit more freedom as she's got older. Definitely motivation can be a problem. Last night was a case in point. I thought, I want to go out on my bike. It was actually not a bad evening. It was still quite cold up here, considering it's late April. But I knew, and this is from experience, although it might be hard to get out, I never come back saying, I wish I hadn't gone on my bike. I wish I hadn't gone out for that walk. I know that if I get out, that I'll enjoy it. The hardest bit is getting the bike out the garage or setting foot out the door. But once I'm out, I'm out. I'm also quite clear about boundaries as well. So when I was training for my I went a coast-to-coast route, which was an off-road route from the North Sea to the Irish Sea. So it wasn't the traditional coast-to-coast, it was the Reivers route. So you go out via Scotland, so it's a little bit longer and parts of it are really quite remote. But I knew that I had to train for that. If I didn't train, it would have been, it would have been much more difficult. So it's almost that little bit. The more effort and energy I put in now, the more enjoyment I'll have later. So I use that as a bit of a motivation for me, that I know if I put the time and the energy in now, I will get paid back dividends. But because of that, I did put boundaries in. So when I had people saying, oh, can you come out for a coffee or go out for lunch or evening meal or whatever it would be, I had one day a week that I would keep, like a Thursday evening, because I'd be training Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and at the weekend. So people would have to slot into that, what was ever that Thursday time. And I was quite strict about that. And it was almost about training other people as well. I mean, I'm fortunate that I've got a husband who he's actually surfing in the Maldives at the moment, so it can't be bad. He's already been away snowboarding this year, so he goes away and does things. So my view is, well, there's no reason why I can't go away. And it's good to be a role model for my daughter as well. I don't want her to think that she can't go away and do things when she's grown up or has other commitments. And, yes, there's, I'm wife, mother, worker, and I've got all of those roles, but I'm also the role as me, Kate, and I need to do those other things to make me mentally and physically feel good. So it's important that I do fit those into the schedule. So and I think you just have to be quite strict, and what works for me won't work for everybody else. And I'm very fortunate that I live in the part of the world where, I'm looking down the street now and I can see the sea. So, within 2 or 3 minutes, I can be barefoot on the sand. Not today, it's still a bit too cold, but in the summer, I can go out and do that. I can go in the sea if I wanted. Things are quite accessible where I am. I can get out within half an hour. I can be out in the wilds in Northumberland. So I'm very fortunate. If you live, in the middle of a city, the planning that you'd need would be different.
Yeah, and that's really true. And I think this is it. I think often when we see people's lives on social media, or we see them, or we chat to friends and we're like, oh, well, they're able to do that. Or, why can't I get out and do this? Why am I finding this so difficult? And it's that point that, like you said, everybody's circumstances are different and we do have different access. I think what I really liked was your point about, choices in a way that it can look easy and fluid and spontaneous from an observer's point of view. But I think what you've just outlined is that actually there's a lot of hard work that goes into that.
And I would also argue, Nikki, that when I was doing my training for my coast to coast, I had a professional coach. So I had a site, because I'd never done anything like that before, and I'd got no idea if I could do it. The first time I ever rode a bike in like 30 years, I struggled to cycle 3 miles. So, 200 miles was a different prospect. So, but by having somebody that was a coach that could hold me accountable, so he could see on Strava whether I was doing my training. So again, that was a good motivation, knowing I had somebody watching me and that I had to account for what I had been doing or not been doing, as the case may be.
Yeah, no, that point about accountability, I think it's so overlooked, because we tend to think, we should be able to do it all by ourselves, or, that it's not somehow valid if you've had help or support. But like you say, actually, given everybody's the demands on all of our time and the constant pressures, whether it's work, relationships, whatever it is, actually having that accountability, having people in your corner and enabling you to keep going or supporting you, I think it's so vital. I was laughing because I was thinking back to, I signed myself up for a 100-mile cycle last year. And then did literally no training from a couple of goes on the turbo trainer. I was in a world of pain. I think I got about 50 miles. I was like, you know what, this is not my day. But I was thinking, actually part of it was the accountability to get out and go for regular cycles, to be honest.
Yeah.
So,
and I think it's not just about having somebody professionally, it's also having friends and family that are your cheerleaders, that who's going to ask you about, have you done this? Have you done that? How did you get on? That are interested. I think if you're just doing it completely on your own, it's really hard. And you're right, social media doesn't always portray that. But I think for most people, it's about having a good team around you.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. So I guess, now you've completed your rather epic challenge and had, and certainly from the photos, I mean, it looked like an absolutely incredible experience. I mean, are you the sort of person that thinks, okay, I've done that, I need to do something else? Or is it a case of...
Yeah.
Most people are, to be fair.
I am a little bit like that, and I know that about myself. As you get older, you get to know yourself better, and I hadn't anticipated how much I would actually enjoy it. And the bits that I really enjoyed were the remote bits, and they were a little bit what I was concerned about to begin with, because I knew if there was a mechanical failure or we got injured, we were miles from anywhere. So but actually that was the bit that I really, really loved. So it was thinking about, what did I really love about that and what am I going to do next? So I have sort of thought about what I'm doing. So I have got, but again, thinking about what's possible, because things cost money as well, so I've got a small trip that I'm doing from my house, but a friend's coming and we're cycling over a weekend from sort of the mouth of the River Tyne all the way along the coast and up to Berwick upon Tweed. So, which is an 80-mile journey, but it'll be right on the coast. There's castles, so it's not as big or as epic as the other journey, but it was just something to keep my hand in. With another friend, I'm also doing the Loch Ness 360 trail, so that's quite a new trail which I found, which is only sort of been within the last year. So we'll probably do that over 2 or 3 days. And then I have got my really big trip is Everest Base Camp, which will be in October this year. God, fingers crossed. This is the 4th time it's been rescheduled.
Oh gosh.
In May 2020. So it's been rescheduled, but I do feel a lot more hopeful. So although I'm doing some bike riding, I've also got to do some hiking training as well. So I'll be putting my rucksack on and putting some weights in the back and running up and down the steps to get myself fit for that as well.
Oh, how exciting. Yeah, I think that, it's also that context, isn't it? That actually, some adventures or different types of adventures are now becoming more possible, where they've been really sort of constricted or compressed for the last couple of years, 2.5 years, whatever it is now. I don't know. I've lost track of time totally. But, that thing of that possibility opening up.
I think you had to be more creative during lockdowns and when you couldn't go far. And that was really how I came to do my cycle route last year, because I was pretty sure that Everest wasn't going to happen. And I wanted something to train for. And it'd always been in my mind to do that route. And I wasn't sure whether I could do it or not. I've got a friend who's a really big cyclist and she was encouraging me to do it. But it was something that I knew, come what may, because I could do it from the house, that it was accessible. So sometimes you have to be a bit creative to think about what is possible with what you've got now. And even if you've got big plans for the future, there's no reason why you can't work towards whatever that plan is, but do something a bit smaller now on a smaller scale.
No, definitely. I was reminded as you were saying that, I was listening to a podcast yesterday with Oliver Berkman. They were talking about how sometimes the creativity is in the constraint, that we tend to think that creativity comes from sort of limitless possibility, but actually, and it really did make me reflect on actually the pandemic and lockdown, and how actually by having those really, I guess, severe constraints on our freedom of movement and what we were able to do, but actually such a huge amount of creativity also came out of that. And in a lot of ways, I think connected more people with adventure than perhaps would have done so beforehand.
I mean, we've got a lot of cold water swimmers that go in the North Sea here, and there was always a group of people pre-pandemic, but a lot more people have got into it. And last year when we were so restricted, I thought, well, I may as well give it a go. Water isn't really my thing. I'm very much out of my comfort zone in water. But I did do it, and I did a bit more stand-up paddleboarding, which I want to get to grips with more, because I think that can offer some really good adventures. But I just need to feel a little bit bit more comfortable with it. I'm not great when I'm on deep water. I find it really quite intimidating. So, you know, I think you're right. It has opened up and people have been more prepared to try things. And certainly my thoughts were, any opportunity that comes my way, I'm going to do it, because I never know what's going to happen and when we might be restricted again in whatever way that is. And I think for me, it's a good ethos. If something good comes my way and it's an opportunity, what have I got to lose? I may as well try it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that perspective about how you, and going back to that point about motivation and how you keep motivated, how you keep going, especially when other things get in the way, that actually, you know, having that perspective, well, you know, I now know what it feels like to lose that option in a small way or in a sort of a time and space bounded way. But yeah, that actually this is what we have right now. And also segues perfectly into my final question, which I ask all my guests, so you'll have to probably think of something else, but sorry. But just wondering, you know, if someone's listening to this and they think, you know what, I would like to live more adventurously. I do want to embrace those opportunities. I don't quite know where to get started or how to get started. I mean, what's one piece of advice you'd give them?
I think if you don't really know, you want to live more adventurously, but you don't know what draws you or what sort of things that you might like to do, I would spend a bit of time thinking about, where is your attention? If you're looking and scrolling through social media, what sort of things are you looking at or spending time on? So is it something around cycling? Is it more water sports stuff? What is it that's drawing your attention? What sort of books do you read? What books do you want to read? And where do you feel perhaps a bit excited or even a bit nervous in what sort of topic? And I think then once you've got that thought about what it is that you want to do, you need to then expose yourself to that a little bit more. So whether that's, you know, going along to a gym to get fit, to be able to do what you want to do, finding like-minded people. So I know with cycling, certainly for women, there's the breeze rides, which are very much women-centered rides. They're not particularly long, so it can be a bit intimidating to start at first. So there are definitely things out there that to help people take their first step. And I would think about having the right people around you. That's really important. And if you haven't got any of your sort of friends, then you need to look elsewhere to find those people.
Yeah, that's really true, isn't it? I think going back to that point about, whether it's accountability, whether it's support, having the right people around you, having people to encourage you and feel it's possible, I think, as much as anything else.
I think there's two things I would think. There's if people are stepping out of their comfort zone, some of it is around practicalities. So that's like, do I need a new skill, equipment? Can I get time? But then there's also the psychological aspect, which is around self-belief. And you need to be able to help both of those things along. So that's why I'd say people in terms of professional people, but also your friends and family as well.
Definitely. As you were speaking, I was just thinking, padded shorts are a really good idea too.
Well, they make
in both snowboarding and cycling. But I think that's a really important thing to raise around, you know, it is, the equipment can make the difference actually when you're starting off and you don't know what to do. There's the beauty in not knowing and in sort of just giving things a go, but also actually, I think particularly as you get older, it's that thing of actually what's going to make this feel comfortable and possible for me. And actually, if I know what the right gear is, if I've got someone who can provide that access, that information, wherever it is, it will make such a huge difference to my experience. I
would definitely. The first time I cycled, I just had leggings on, knickers, as you would expect, and no cycling gloves. I was on a bike that didn't fit me. And once I changed those things, I had a bike fit. I wore padded cycling shorts with no knickers, stops chafing. And all of those other bits and pieces just transformed it so that it wasn't this horrible sufferfest. Why am I doing this? Actually, if you get all the right equipment, it then just makes it so much enjoyable. Life's too short, personally, I think, to be doing something just because you feel you ought to when you're not enjoying it.
Yeah, completely. I love that point about like it being a sufferfest, because I think sometimes we think it should be. We think, in order for something to be a valid adventure, it needs to be super hard and actually pretty grim. And actually, sometimes you get good stories out of that, but you know what, you're not going to keep on going if it's just a wholly unpleasant. And again, going that point about sort of choices and priorities, and actually you tend to prioritize things when they're really good fun and when you're getting a lot out of it. So
absolutely.
Here's the more padded shorts. And no knickers, obviously. I don't know where this podcast is going, so I might just end it here. Kate, that has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for joining. I really genuinely could just keep chatting about this for ages, but in the interest of time I probably should stop here. But if people want to find out more about you, about your book, where can they go?
Right, they can go. I'm on Instagram and Twitter as mummysnowboarder, and I've got two websites. So there's mummysnowboarder.com, which is where my blog is, and then takeitallonboard.com is more about me and my book. So, and you can get the book on Amazon anyway. So those are sort of the main platforms that you'll find me on. It's been a delight. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh no,
chatting.
It's been an absolute pleasure. And I'll pop all of those links in the show notes so everyone can go and access them and find out more about you and get your book as well. But yeah, no, thank you so much again, Kate. It's just been wonderful to have you here. And yeah, good luck with all your adventures coming up as well. It sounds amazing. And I hope you get to Everest.
You'll see it on Instagram. So you'll see when I get there.
I'll know.
Absolutely.
Cool. Good luck. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. So a massive thank you to Kate for coming on the show and chatting to me. There were a couple of points I wanted to pick up this week. The first one, and they're sort of linked in a way, I think it was the point she made around prioritizing yourself and your own needs, and what a challenge that can be, but that what can seem easy in a photo on Instagram actually has so much planning and thought and preparation that's gone into it. But also, I really liked her point around actually sometimes you're not in the right place to adventure. Actually, sometimes where you are right now is, there's all sorts of things going on. You have lots of responsibilities, and actually taking on a huge adventure can feel like a big thing to do. And you focus on the things that you can weave into your life. Things change, and at different stages, we need different things. And I think there is a bit of there can be quite a narrative in terms of adventure, in that we should always be up for it. We should always be looking for the new thing or the next thing we're going to do. And as soon as we complete one adventure, we're on to the others, and whether those are big adventures or small adventures. But I think the reality is that life's not like that, and adventure's not like that, that sometimes we need to take a pause. Sometimes we are in a space where a huge adventure seems possible or seems like is the thing that we want to devote our time and energy to. And we feel like we're in a place where we can prioritize that. And at other times, actually, it can feel like a really challenge just getting out the front door with your socks on or not, as the case may be. But, that's okay too. That an everyday adventure can be something really tiny, but that sometimes our comfort zones are so challenged by life itself that, we don't have to be doing something in order to feel like we're living, in order for things to feel like they are worthwhile, that you are enough just doing whatever you are. And I know that this is a show that absolutely encourages to get out there and challenge your comfort zone and seek out adventures in whatever form. But you can also give yourself a break and think, what is the adventure I need right now? And maybe that adventure that I need right now is a walk around the park with the dogs, or it is enough just doing what I'm doing, but I know I'll come back to it at some point. Anyway, I'd love to know what you think. Please, as always, get in touch. You can find me on Instagram, Resilience at Work. You can find me on Facebook, Resilience at Work. You can go to my website, resiliencework.co.uk. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Nikki Bass. So please do get in touch, reach out. And if you've enjoyed this podcast and fancy leaving a review, that's always appreciated too. Anyway, we have one more episode to go with this season. It's been a slightly disjointed season, not helped by my on the bus, off the bus house move, but we have one more episode. It's an absolute cracker. I can't wait to share it with you. So please do keep tuned in. It'll be dropping very, very soon. Otherwise, have a fantastic week and I'll speak to you soon. Take care. Bye.